Okay, so I'm talking to John Scanlon about the Irish hypnotherapy conference, April 5th and 6th, Ireland. But I want to know, John, what you because you're doing the piece and it's quite unusual. Tell us about what you're going to be
Yeah,
working with.
my talk is on adoption and hypnotherapy and the combination of the two. Um, and I mean, I work with it. Um, I am adopted, which is why the subject is fairly close to my heart. I've lived with some of the consequences of it, and I had a fairly happy childhood growing up. Um, a lot of loss in it, but but it's hypnotherapy helped me to overcome a lot of the challenges that come with adoption. And I wanted to create awareness about it, number one, and secondly, to empower hypnotherapists who come to deal with it, because most of us will know someone who was adopted. So it's adoption or early childhood trauma will also be covered in that presentation. And it's about the effects of rejection at a young age and how that then plays out later on in life. Um, and often people will come and they won't even mention the fact that there's adoption. But yet, suddenly, as soon as you become aware of it, you know where to look. You know how to begin to resolve stuff fairly quickly for people. It's a process that everybody has to go through. But I mean, Ireland has a history with adoption, and obviously, was it 3 years ago we published the whole mother and baby home report, and it's kind of brought a lot of stuff back up. And
Mm.
if you think about this in a really logical way, when we're adopted, and it's something that is foundational, it's something that happens at the very early stages in life. And when it happens, it just sets a direction. Life happens on top of that, but it does set a direction where you're immediately, not the energy that you've been familiar with for 9 months or however long it takes after that is now suddenly no longer there and someone else is taking care of you. So even though you're nonverbal, you're still aware of all this.
Wow.
And it's the solution that everybody goes to is talk therapy. But how can you talk about something that you experienced when you were nonverbal? We can't remember it. So, whereas hypnotherapy allows us to get into that frame and allows those changes to happen. So, that's kind of, I suppose, the big takeaway from all that. But there are so many people that are then involved in the process because it's not just the child. There is the birth mother who had has given up that child. Often that goes against her own beliefs. There's a whole different set of circumstances. Everybody's going to be different. But as in the case of my own mother, was living with guilt and shame as a consequence of it and took down different paths. Um, Others, they've made that choice, but it's like a part of them is missing. And then often the birth father doesn't know, or if he does, then and it has refused to be involved, then that's also an impact on the mother as well, which may need to be factored into the equation to help her through that process because she's been rejected in that process. Um, and then often, a father may just get a knock on the door 20 years' time and go, I'm your son, I'm your daughter, how's it going? It's kind of like, well, and then obviously the last part of that is the adopting parents, because most often they've been trying to have their own child for a long time.
Mm.
And that brings up emotions for them. Um, you know, uh, they have a they have a they have a son, they have a daughter, they have a baby in the home now. And sometimes that just causes chain reactions too. Like in my own family's case, my parents have been trying for a while, but my brother's, who's younger than me, is naturally born. So it's kind of sorry, it's kind of there's all kinds of factors that kick into play when you're dealing with adoption. And the most obvious ones would be, say, the birth mother with guilt and shame,
Mm.
the the birth fathers, if somebody arrives at their door, how they process that, how they deal with that, or they may have that shame themselves. Everybody's different, but for the child, which would be the biggest set of impacts altogether, it ends up with a feeling of not being good enough, of not being worthy, because you were literally just taken from your birth mother and given to someone else. And it's a beautiful process. The process itself, conceptually, is a beautiful process. In that, if somebody can't provide a home for a child, and what you're doing is providing a
Mm.
natural, safe home for the child, there's nothing wrong with that concept whatsoever. It's that it is so much of it is where we're not considering how the child feels because they can't speak.
You can't, can you? How can you? Yeah, because you can't consider the child. You're down to the practicalities. You need
Yeah,
somebody that's going to feed and water you and cuddle you
correct.
and look after you. But I bet, I could be wrong, but I bet sometimes people come to you, they've never talked about it.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it is surrounded in shame. It's also surrounded in it's not important. It logically it doesn't make sense. But why do I feel these emotions? Why have I a dislike of authority, which is one of those things that might happen? Why am I more likely to be addicted to stuff? Why do I
Really? There's more
Yeah, I mean,
addiction.
it'd be twice the national averages in pretty much
Wow.
everything where addiction issues lie in. It all stems back to that feeling of kind of not being good enough. And the stuff that happens to us as a young child, as a baby, or as a young child, how it plays off in our lives. Why am I leaving relationships?
Mm.
Why am I? Well, the answer is often I'm going to leave before she does, so I don't get hurt.
Yeah, yeah. That if my
It's
mother didn't keep me, then why would anybody else? Yeah.
that, it's that fear of rejection and that feeling of not being good. So there's all kinds of factors to consider. Nobody really talks about it. When they do, they talk about it in a counseling talk therapy context. And I'd say to all my clients, you've two parts you've two hemispheres in your brain. You've logic and emotion. And I'm
Mm.
simplifying it, but you have logic and emotion. And logically, a whole load of things, but emotionally, you feel different about certain things. And when the two of them have an argument, emotion will always win.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but you can't logic that emotion. How do you logic that emotion? How do you logic something that says, I'm not good enough, even though somebody took the time to choose me, somebody wanted to give me a nice, safe home, but yet you don't feel good enough? Why? Because you were rejected.
I've no, I haven't worked with people, but just when I've come across people that have been adopted, they often say, one of the first things I say is, I'm really, really grateful for the life I've had. I'm really grateful to my adopted parents, but there's always that but. And
There's that feeling of, yeah, like, what is it that happened? And hypnotherapy can never change the past. I mean, and I don't want to get into too much of a rant against anything here, but hypnotherapy can never change the past.
mm, mm,
I'd often describe that when we go into an emotional state, it's like watching a movie that, one of those all-consuming movies where someone walks into the room, you just ignore them,
yeah,
right? If we get into a strong emotional state, which sometimes adoption will bring up, particularly if it's a feeling of not being good enough, um, you go into that movie
mm,
and you, but you don't understand it because it's beneath your conscious awareness. We can't change the fact that adoption happened. You're going to know that, but it's
mm.
about taking the emotion out of it so that the fact is there. And if somebody then calls you, you go, right, yeah,
That's interesting.
you
Taking
don't lull in it.
yeah,
Yeah. And
interesting.
it's how do you logic that? You
Mm,
can't, not well, you can, but it's really painful and it's a slow process. Hypnotherapy allows us to access it much quicker, much easier.
yeah.
Um, and it's still a process, don't get me wrong, it's still a
Mm,
process. There's still work involved. Um, but it's a work that I deeply enjoy terribly because when you're working with people who have either adoption related issues or early childhood related issues, what you're doing is you're just freeing them from the past.
yeah, yeah,
And more importantly, they're freeing themselves.
yeah, yeah.
That's,
Do you teach therapists how to
yeah, yeah.
get
Myself and Sheila Granger. I don't know if anybody, a lot of hypnotherapists will know Sheila. She's also adopted, so she and I did a course about 6 months ago on on teaching hypnotherapists how to work with adopted people.
Brilliant, brilliant. Because it's surprising how many people are out there that have been adopted. And oh, I notice when they talk about it, they always start off by saying, I'm grateful for where I, but they always lower their voice and they go, it's almost like they've got to whisper it. It's a weird thing that they'll talk about anything. They'll talk about any personal stuff or anything. When they go, I was, you know, it's like they kind of whisper it, which is really, really interesting. It's like nobody's listening. You're okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, it's a
And
fascinating subject. I'm so glad. Have you thought? I'm batting in it, but have you thought of writing a book? Because I think this would be.
I actually haven't, but it may be something that comes up on the horizon as time goes by. I mean, for like my own story is that I was adopted at 6 months of age, and I'd been 6 months in an orphanage before that. But I lost my adopted father at 15 and my adopted mother at 17. So that was reinforcing an awful lot of that rejection, of that feeling of being let
Mm.
down. My grandmother lived with us. I lost her when I was 21. So by the time I was 21, I'd lost the four most significant adults in my life.
Yeah,
That, like, there was a lot of anger, a lot of hurt, a lot of, you know, and hypnotherapy was the tool that has allowed me to kind of live comfortably with that.
that is when you find a good hypnotherapist when they've been through it. There's a whole load of things I don't touch because I've not experienced them and it's not my expertise. Anything to do with addictions, I'm there. I can work with it because I've got that. They say there's no such thing as addictive nature. There is. And there is for some people. It's things I've been through. It's like I don't work with depression or panic attacks because I
Mm.
don't understand them. When you've been through certain things, and you've lived it, you really understand. And the relief for that person to sit in front of you and go, "Oh, you know what I'm talking about. You understand."
It's
That's
an immediate
everything.
rapport thing. I mean, it really is because people want to be heard. They want to be able to, and I think that's probably why people go to counseling. They want to be heard. But when you go to a hypnotherapist who understands,
Yeah.
then you're being heard anyway.
Yeah, I think that's
You
so.
know,
I love this, and I really hope you write a book because I think there's people, and it's not just where we are. I think this is global. There's people out there that would pick that book up, and there might be. I think you'd have a huge amount to share with them that would really make a lot of
thank you.
sense. How they deal with it, how they understand it, telling case studies. I think would be hugely helpful. People are just isolated with this.
They are, and I mean, it is the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference, and there's another talk is just coming into my mind, even though it's not connected to adoption, but it's very much connected to this subject. The title of the talk, which is by Shelley Stockwell, is "What's Love Got to Do with It?"
Yeah.
The solution in adoption is to allow that child to feel that love.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate solution, to
Yeah.
know that they've always been loved.
Yeah.
There's a particular process that I love to run, an inner child journey, which is one of the really deepest ones that allows people to experience that sense and to reframe their history to
That
a
is
feeling of always being loved.
I love it. I love this. So yeah, that sounds so good. There's so many people I know that would love to work on this. They need to work on that. As I say, it's always a bit hushed. It's always something the other thing they say is I can't talk to my partner about it. Yeah, I don't talk to because that unless you've been there, you don't understand. I can't talk to other people about it. So I think
Yeah.
for them to sit in front of somebody that's skilled at this is warm, that it must be so enlightening to sit there with somebody and actually be able to openly speak and they know what you're on about because they can't talk to people. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but I really want you to write a book. I really think this is a
It's-
book you could have all sorts of things in there that would make a big difference to people and they would read it and go, that's me, that makes sense to me. I really think that'd be amazing. So I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you.
This is going to be super duper because yeah, it's an amazing subject. Yeah, it's such an amazing subject. So I look forward to seeing you there. I'm going to be there. Can't wait. I'm going to come to your talk. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.